All right, I think we are live and in action here. So welcome everyone. Welcome to our terrific Tuesday talks about all things green and gardening and growing and getting another season going together. So my name is Andrea. I am the Director of Sustainable Environments with Halton Environmental Network, which just means I love to talk about things that are in the garden, soon to be in the garden, anything garden related. So I will help facilitate today's conversation, and joining me, I will pass it over to Wendy to say good morning. No, afternoon.
Yes. Well, good afternoon, everyone. So yes, my name is Wendy Roberts. I'm with an organization called Sustainable Milton, and our goal is to help make our town more sustainable. And some of the projects, and in fact, my favorite projects that we're involved in are various gardens around the town. And of course, my own gardens, which require a lot of work. So a lot of learning happening, and looking forward to the rest of today. Thank you. Over to you, Kevin.
Hello, I'm Kevin, and I just typed in McQuestion Urban Farm underneath there. I worked down at McQuestion Urban Farm for like the last 6 years. I've been farming certified organic produce for about 20 years now. And I've had, lots of experience visiting farms. I've ridden my bicycle all over and visited literally thousands of farms across Europe and Asia and Canada. And down at McQuestion Urban Farm, we're on Britannia Avenue in Hamilton, and we have about 2 acres of space that we're growing kind of A to Z vegetables. Some of it is permaculture in that we have fruit trees, but we are mostly growing annual crops. So I'll happily share what I have experienced and know about permaculture, which is always ever evolving with every season of observation.
Mm-hmm. And joining us today, a new face, a new friend. Welcome, Tiffany, if you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us what brings you to the conversation today.
Hello, Sago, everyone. I am Tiffany, and I'm a member here. I've lived in Milton for the last 5-6 years now, and newly a volunteer member at Grandmother's Voice. I love to eat, and it's been something deep inside of a dream of wanting to be able to grow my own food, only for the fact that we have a large family and we truly do love our food. So I would love to learn about being able to grow it. I know everybody says you can do it in small spaces. I'm a firm believer that we need sustainability when it comes to our food, and I have recently joined in to the gardening with Terry Lynn. So I am super excited to be on this learning journey right now of gardening, and I'm happy to share and be part of this panel with all of you. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. So welcome. And for those of you who haven't maybe seen previous broadcasts, there's a group of us who are mentoring or being mentored under Terry Lynn Brand from Mohawk Seed Keepers. So this past weekend, we met up at the Grandmother's Voice Garden for our first meeting with Terry Lynn, and Tiffany and Wendy are part of that group as well. So we have seen each other recently, and today we're going to bring some of that conversation into this conversation. Today's topic is about permaculture, and while we didn't specifically cover that with Terry Lynn, there were certain aspects of it that I think are very applicable to all growing methods, and specifically to permaculture. So if you remember when we walked around let me even back up another step. So permaculture, what is it? It's a kind of a fun word, and it's a mashup of permanent agriculture. So not things that you have to wait until the season warms up or start your seeds indoors, although that could be part of it. But what is permanently around us that we can consume? And there's a methodology around how we can intentionally do this, but it's also part of what Mother Nature has to teach us as well. So, Kevin, I think in one of our past conversations, we had talked about the first principle of permaculture is what?
I like to call it hammock time. It really means observation.
Observation. And so what was one of the first things that we did when we were at the Grandmother's Voice Garden with Terry Lynn, when we went out to that empty, weed-riddled field, is we stopped, we observed, where's the wind coming from? Where is the sun? What does our space look like? What's underneath our feet? As we start to work in this space, what are the changes that we see and notice? We had a week of rain that was forecast. It didn't come, but when the rains do come, how does that change what we're seeing in the space? So observation, principle number one. And, it's something that reminds us to also slow down a little bit. Was there anything else observing being done? What else did we talk about with Terry Lynn?
I think one of the things that is also really important, and it really resonated, is I understand that there's a permaculture ethic, and it talked about caring for the land, caring for the humans, and taking your fair share and giving fair share to others.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was very similar to what we talked about before we went out onto the land, in terms of with Terry Lynn saying much the same thing about taking care of the land, taking care of ourselves and humans, and those that come after us. So I thought that was really, it seems so simple, but it doesn't happen all the time. So I think if you look at the principles of permaculture around that ethic, it says a lot, I think. So I'll stop there. Yeah, it was quite a day. So.
Mm-hmm. And that's before we even put anything in the ground.
Yes.
Anything that you want to add to that, Tiffany?
No, not sorry. No, not much. I mean, you really did cover it all as far as observation and being able to look at the space. I didn't actually. It's something that I didn't really know until you get out there, and then you're like, yes, this would be the very first step.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How can we impose something on the land without first observing what's there? Yeah. So, Kevin, what's your experience with permaculture?
Well, I don't want to brag, but I went to a farm and then I just dug a whole bunch of raised beds and just let it out. So observation would have been a great key in my early days of farming, which I had attended one of these talks. Just to reiterate what Wendy was saying there too about giving back, like not only giving back to our fellow members of the community, but planting on your outside edges. Even if you're in a backyard, you got a big backyard garden, or like I'm more in fields and stuff, but planting the things that if I'm seeing pests coming in, whether it's deer, rodents, bunnies, whatever, planting things on the margins that they're going to eat.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that I'm going to lose it, and if I don't lose it and I get to harvest it and share it with other people or eat it ourselves, that's great. Yeah, that's a really good thing because we're always trying to. Sometimes I think farming is more about, or gardening is more about destruction than creation, and it's important to recognize that pests are beautiful creatures that are equally as important.
Yeah, I love getting the question if I'm doing a workshop or something, like, how do I keep the squirrels out of my garden? How do I keep the this or that out of my garden? Like, good luck. Like, unless you want to build a house around it or a dome of some kind, you have to account for feeding the animals too. They have a right, the rabbits. Plant stuff at the edges that will fill them up before they get to your garden.
I always account for a good 30% loss minimum. And, I'm surprised when I don't have that loss, but that's a good kind of way to look at it.
30%?
Yeah, I expect a 30% loss. Because, I mean, sometimes I've had deer wipe out literally like 10 grand for food. It just happens. But, yeah, I account for 30% loss.
I guess I'm a little less generous. I usually say 10.
That way I'm happier because usually
Yeah.
it isn't pretty.
So do you remember what Terry Lynn was talking about when we went out and started measuring in from the edge of the garden, what she said to do with that? Wendy?
I remember that. That was actually, yeah, that was exactly to make sure that we build around for the animals and to make sure we're able to give that back to them. And don't plant what you plant more at the beginning or at the front of the so that we understand what we're weeding and what we're not. Sorry, my camera.
Yep. To throw some extra seeds down so that as things start to emerge, you can identify. So it helps with the identification so that we're not pulling out, thinking that we're weeding out something that we don't want and accidentally pulling out our plant. And then, planting those edge areas with things that will attract the birds and the butterflies and fill them up and leave some of our other things, maybe not the butterflies, but the squirrels and building that squirrel highway maybe out of sunflowers or cucumbers, some of the things that are prolific givers, fill up the wildlife. So Kevin, talk to us about your fruit trees at McQueston. What kinds of fruit are you growing?
We've had a bit of a struggle with our fruit trees in the way we were watering initially. So we were doing overhead watering, which is not the greatest way to do it. But yeah, we have apricots and peaches and plums and pears and apples. A lot of those tender fruits. We didn't have any cherry. Yeah, we pruned them back pretty good. They got a little bit unruly there, so we pruned them back hard last year, and then I pruned them back again. I'm pretty happy with how they look this year. With those fruit trees too, usually you're working on last year's nutrients. So putting rock dust and minerals and stuff like that in and around the trees is always a good way to go. The beauty of having permanent, whether it's brambles like your berries or fruit trees, is you have those permanent roots that are in the earth. And I know the last 3 or 4 talks I've been talking lots about fungus. And the mycorrhizal fungi, especially the saprophytic fungi are the decomposers, and the mycorrhizal are the ones that symbiotically live in and around your roots and make nutrients available. When you have those zones in if you're making a permaculture design, usually you have your fruit trees and stuff a little bit further away from your house, and you'll have more perennial stuff closer to your house that you're going to use more like your herbs. So you can, if you're cooking, you can just run out of the kitchen in the back and snip your oregano or thyme or whatever fresh from the garden. So it's such a beautiful thing to have fresh right there. But because you have those living root systems, all other roots that you grow, if there's not compaction in that, they're going to grow into where the tree roots and your other perennial roots are, and then they start to share nutrients through the fungal strands in the soil. Fungus is this little hollow tubes, and if you look at it under a microscope, and when they get broken up, they lose their ability to be able to share nutrient and move things back and forth. So that's the beauty of having those perennials in and amongst your gardens, so that they can share with the other vegetables.
Yeah, keeping those nutrient highways flowing back and forth. When I think permaculture, something that I'm trying to do more research and more learning on is planting in a guild, which is understanding those interactions of the plants that you intentionally plant together. So there's different layers. You've got your canopy layer of trees, so your big guys, your big nut trees, or whatever your taller growing trees. Then you've got understory trees. Then you've got your smaller shrubs and berries, vines, ground covers, and then your underground stuff like the mushrooms and some of your root crops as well. And so knowing how to plant all of those things together is where I think people can get a little bit lost in the science and the mounds of information, books and a million research or websites that you can research. Is there a way that we can simplify some of this, Kevin? Do you do any of that guild work with your fruit trees?
We haven't been doing a lot, to be honest. And I mean, permaculture is probably the approach of it, because I haven't managed my own space. I've always been on other people's farms. It's been a lot harder. I am setting up something this year, which will hopefully be a little more permanent. But I actually haven't. My strategy has always been to make sure I'm doing good foliar sprays to keep my plants healthy. And then the closest I would get to like companion planting is more what I would say. So like marigolds and onions and carrots go good together. And I've been more doing that kind of thing in regards to our field crop production for our gardens.
Okay. So companion planting, we've sort of talked about this on the weekend, more as an ecological system, an ecological agricultural system, things that work well, things that support each other, enhance each other's growth. So I like that framework as well to really just kind of simplify things down a little bit. Does it support me? Does it support the plants that we're trying to grow? If so, it's a good thing. Let's do it.
And I guess back to that observation thing, when you do plant certain things together, how do they do throughout the year? Looking at how dark the foliage is and the fruits that are being produced and all that kind of stuff, and taking notes.
Oh, yes. Yes. It comes back to that journal, doesn't it?
Notes and pictures are great.
Yeah.
And that's something that Terry Lynn actually gave all of us a journal, and then set aside time for us to write in the journal, and then gave us a little bit of homework, to do some more work in the journal. I just wanted a couple of things that I found interesting in reinforcing some of the stuff that we've talked about earlier, and that is, to till or not to till. And so my sense is that Terry is of the school, don't till, just turn over, so you're not destroying what nature has been building up for years and years. And then the other thing, the working with nature, and because the property that the garden is on a slight incline, decline, depending on where you're going. And so she talked about digging that trench, not just to stop the water from flowing all the way down, but also that it feeds the plants and the soil just to the south of where the trench would be. So, so I thought those were some very interesting things that she taught us as well.
Mm-hmm. To till or not to till, that is the question.
I was told recently too that it's kind of a misnomer, tilling and not tilling, in that a lot of no-till systems they're okay with that kind of tillage. It depends on, I guess, how extreme you are. But yeah, I mean, I only ever try to get like that much of the soil at the top turn, so then I'm not going down too deep to disrupt all the fungal strands and fungal highways and networks that are there. And it's as simple as putting lots of hay down, or a mulch, plastic tarps, or the other way that people do it. But yeah, I do agree with that. It's very beneficial.
It's a lot less work too.
Exactly, and if you can do it in the fall before the spring comes, then you're that much better off too. It's that kind of another permacultural principle is always planning ahead, so you know from your observations what you're going to be walking into, and being able to adapt to those conditions that you've noticed.
So what is our second principle of permaculture?
I always think more hammock time.
So we observe and then we reflect. We ponder.
Yeah, observe and interact. like the 12 principles that seem to come up in a lot of like the more studious or bigger workshops that are designed for those principles: observe and interact, catch and store energy. So I think you just touched on that a little bit there, Wendy, with looking at where the water flows and how can you store that water, and or the sunlight energy, those kinds of things.
Yeah, we had an interesting question come up that pertains exactly to that. So how can we store and trap and reuse or save some of the sun's energy, the heat? Because as we were starting to observe the ground, the question was, do we remove the rocks that we find?
Because the rocks are staying warm longer. And,
yeah.
Right. And like another, I'm a big fan of raised beds for a number of reasons, but one is for storing the heat too, because if your bed is up and curved like this, you've got this much more sun hitting it and keeping that bed up, so it's going to get warmer faster in the spring. So that's another good way to store the energy. And those black tarps too, they're also going to help with heating up the soil so it's ready to receive the hot crop stuff like beans and squash and zucchinis that need 15 Celsius or higher to germinate.
Tiffany, what's the one thing that you're excited about learning how to grow and plant? Plant and grow. There we go.
I say squashes. That's a huge staple in our house. From zucchini to butternut to acorn, we eat it all year round, actually, in everything on all the time. So that's one thing I would love. Tomatoes. Yes. When I cook East Indian food and everything like that, I probably go through about 15, maybe 22 tomatoes a week. Yeah. And then that's, salsas and everything like that. So, I'd want to stay towards more of the simple growings, I guess, just because I am so new at all of this and learning about the soils and learning about what to put in and watering. And I didn't realize that gardens need heat. Well, I mean, I knew from the sun that they needed heat, but I didn't understand all of that. So learning about all of this is just like, I'm excited. I'm like a little child in a candy store going, yes, I can't wait to see the growth of the garden when it's happening. So I'm super excited.
So what do you think is a complicated thing to grow?
Oh, complicated. I would say mushrooms. Okay. I feel like mushrooms would be a very, very hard one. And then as far as like melons and these kind of things, I don't even know if they're like native to our land to grow melon outside. But that's the other thing too about learning is, do we do like, what are the benefits of raised beds? What are the benefits of doing it straight from the earth? Because I see a lot of, even my neighbors around here, we have like 6x6 backyards. And I see a lot of those big 102 liter black bins where people are growing tomatoes. And like, I mean, they're high vines and they're beautiful. And I mean, they're picking. So it looks like that is a positive way of growing as well. So yeah, I'm not too sure. I think, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the benefit of the raised beds, to kind of answer your question, is you can really control the quality of the soil. So if you're just growing in your backyard, you really have to stop and do that observation as well. Like, are you on solid clay, like the grandmother's voice garden? How much groundwater are you going to get? The raised bed, you can add in specific soil for growing in that type of container. You can add lots of manure and compost, and you can in your backyard as well. It's just, it keeps it nice and contained.
Yes. Yeah. And I did a little bit of learning from the last few years about succulents and, you know, different plants, and didn't realize watering. And, you know, that's the one thing that we learned this weekend is about, you know, we don't have to water every single plant, and you only water those that need it. Because I've killed succulents before. So.
For a desert plant.
Yeah. Yeah.
The only way to succeed is to fail.
I truly agree. Yeah. And I know that, you know, when you say we're going to lose a little bit of crop for food, for the animals around and, you know, doing that, I know that one thing we learned this weekend was about the stages of the garden and looking at it from that point of view. And for me, I was like, that resonated a lot, knowing that, you know, where we're at in the first years as far as going into maturity, and then, you know, after long term. So for me, I was like, yeah, I can take care of children. Let me see if I can take care of a garden. Let's see if we can do that.
Just like every child is different, so is every garden. So there are principles for how to do it, but you're going to have to figure out what's the personality and the quirks of your own.
Yeah.
And then the seasons change to throw another dynamic in there every year.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
And there's going to be new pests that irritate and infect and complicate. And it's just always a learning. What you do one year may not work the next year.
I was going to say too, like there's different, when I say raised beds, like at McQueston here, we're pretty much, 90% of it is raised beds, but they're not raised beds in that they're contained with wood or anything. I have a walk behind tractor that has a rotary plow, it's called, and it just digs under and throws soil up. So I can redefine my paths. But yeah, so it's just a raised bed, and then every few years it starts to settle back in. But after a few years, then I'll reform them and throw the soil from the path back up so that we're not walking on and compacting the actual raised beds.
So it's more mounded than constructed.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I do that where I am in Brant County there as well. There's a lot of water, a high water table in that. So we threw all the soil up to make about, I don't know, maybe about 6 inches above. And then there's a little gully. And then the beauty of that too is that everybody knows where to walk. In theory. Some people still walk right on top of the bed. I'm like, no, the slow spot.
Go around.
So yeah.
Yeah, and I'm on solid clay here in Oakville, so I use 6-inch cedar raised beds just to give it a little bit of soil on top, and then over time, the earthworms recognize that there's something up there that is workable, and now I can dig right into the soil because over time it's been churned over by the insects and organisms within the soil. So raised beds, even that, it means different things to different people.
Okay. And then having, like, when you have your fruit trees and stuff like that, the beauty of that, one of my favorite places to visit was a place in Flamborough that had fruit trees all throughout their gardens, and there was just these different zones where they got shade in certain parts of the day and cool, so they would grow like lettuces and things in the heat of summer that I wouldn't have success growing in an open field. But yeah, utilizing all those different zones and places to grow what you want to grow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They had lots of flowers too. It was such a beautiful farm, fresh cut flowers, veg, and fruit trees. Then I get, again, like one of the permaculture principles is use and value diversity. So recognize what things you have and use them to your advantage. So, lettuces in mid-summer you can probably grow if you have half-day shade underneath some trees and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm excited about creating some biodiversity up in that field.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Any closing thoughts as we wrap up our conversation? Oh, we've got our first question of the day. Anyone doing hugelkultur raised beds? All right,
Yeah.
Kevin. So first let's explain what it is.
So hugelkultur was a term coined by a guy named Holzer, Seth Holzer, and he's an Austrian. You can go visit his place if you can get over to Austria. And what it is basically wood that you bury under your beds. So, I mean, I've done it in the past where I've dug down about this, 6-8 inches. And then I would throw up all again, like with my little machine there or shovels. I mean, I've done it so much shoveling over the years. But you bury wood. You want to bury the right kinds of wood that's starting to already get a little bit punky, like squishy. Really great stuff.
Nothing pressure treated, nothing that's got chemicals in it, just fallen limbs, stuff that's already starting to rot. Sorry, Kevin. Then.
Yep. Nope. Perfect. Yeah, exactly. You can just drag it out of your marginal areas if you have a big tree line or a hedgerow on your farm where trees have fallen in that. You just want to be careful that you're not doing black locust or black walnut locust trees because some of that will acidify soil. But most of your hardwoods are going to be good too. So any hardwood, any firewood that's been sitting out too long and is starting to rot and punky, that's great stuff too. So basically what you do is you bury that, you throw soil up over top of it, and that is going to be, when it gets punky, it's already got all these holes and stuff. So it's holding oxygen, which is really important. You don't want things to go anaerobic in your garden. So when it's underwater, that's anaerobic. If you have heavy clay soils, you can get down a pitchfork and just make physical paths and waterways without flipping the soil. So when you have that punk wood that's slowly decaying, it's releasing nutrients in that, but it's also providing this space for the roots to grab onto, and then they're going to suck nutrient out of it, but then there's all that space for oxygen. It also, as it's breaking down, it's warming up the soil too. So Seth Holzer, he terraced on the sides of mountains in Austria, and he goes and he pulls the snow back, and then there's these turnips and root crops that, because of the heat coming out of his hugelkultur bed, it's warm enough, and he's just pulling them in the middle of winter. It's just fascinating. It's really like next level stuff that should be more common knowledge. And then you can create with hugelkultur raised beds, like if you see the contours of your land and where the water wants to flow and naturally flow, you can do key line design where you're just going to help facilitate that. So if there's a low spot where the water's wanting to go, you can make some raised beds on the outsides of that, and then make some more raised beds getting closer to that. So you're kind of facilitating the water to flow and go where you want it to go. But yeah, hugelkultur is an amazing way to grow beds because you're able to retain like 60 to 80% of the moisture for when the rain come and they go into the soil. It's going to be absorbed into that punk wood and that material that's breaking down in your beds. It's really nice, really amazing concept.
Neat.
Self-fertilizing, self-contained growing methodology.
Yeah, we were having things mature like 10 days faster than they would normally. So if the broccoli said 65 days, we were getting it in 55 days in a lot of those beds because it always had access to water and it had a lot of nutrient going in there too.
All right, we'll write that down in the journal as something to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And a shout out to Jody and Sherry, who are in Toronto today. One of them, I'm assuming Jody, with her very loving message, loving you all from Toronto, from Family Services Ontario Convention. So thank you to Grandmother's Voice for providing this platform and an opportunity to get together and chat. And Tiffany, we hope you will continue to join our conversations. Any final thoughts on permaculture as we wrap things up and say goodbye?
Get out and observe.
Get out and observe. Get out.
Yeah.
Observe. Absolutely, yeah.
Take your lawn chair. Yeah. Take your lawn chair out. Enjoy the sunshine. Make some observations. Take your journal out. Draw some pictures.
Yeah.
Hang up the hammock. Brian, hammock time.
We'll have to get one of those. Yes.
Amazing. Good to see you all. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Thank you, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you.